What if everything you've ever believed about reality was only the surface? What if beneath the names, the systems, the stories, there's a deeper code, an ancient pattern your soul has never forgotten, even if your mind has? You didn't find this video by chance. That quiet restlessness inside you, the one that never fully goes away, no matter how much you distract it, that's what brought you here. Not curiosity, not coincidence, but memory. The kind that doesn't speak in words but in resonance. The kind that's older than time. There is a sacred truth that was once common knowledge among the ancients, but over centuries it was buried, twisted, forgotten. You've been taught to look outward for answers, to trust what can be measured. But what if the truth you're looking for has been waiting inside you all along, softly humming beneath the noise, waiting for the moment you'd be ready to hear it? That moment is now. This isn't just another video, it's a mirror, a key, a quiet ignition. It won't give you a new belief. It will unearth an old knowing. So take a breath, a deep one. Leave your doubt at the door. Let your soul sit upright. And prepare to remember what the world asked you to forget. Welcome to Secrets Beyond Archive. Let the journey begin. From the moment you opened your eyes, you were taught how the world works, what to believe, who to trust, and what's possible. You were handed a map but never told who drew it. The terrain was already labeled. Heaven above, hell below, God somewhere far off, and you, just a flicker of life caught in between. It felt normal. It felt real. But deep down, something didn't feel quite right. That feeling wasn't confusion. It was memory. You've always known there's more than this. But the more you asked, the quieter the answers became. Religion offered rules. Science offered equations. But neither could explain the ache in your soul that told you came from somewhere else. Enter the Urantia Book, not as a doctrine, not as a system, but as a disruption. A document unlike any other. It does not claim to save you. It does not ask you to kneel. It does not present a Messiah to follow. It simply tells you what has been hidden, that the universe is conscious, structured, and intimately aware of your existence, and that you, too, are a piece of that awareness, folded into flesh, longing to remember. The truth it offers isn't loud. It doesn't shout like dogma. It whispers quietly but persistently to the part of you that has never fit neatly inside what you've been told. It speaks to your doubt, not to dismiss it, but to honor it, as a sacred signal that your soul is still listening. And yet this truth was never meant for the masses. That much is clear. The origins of the book are shrouded in mystery. No public author, no official publisher with motive, just a manuscript over 2,000 pages, delivered through a man who never claimed it as his own. Its very existence feels like an act of cosmic rebellion. So why hide it? Because what it reveals doesn't just shift your beliefs, it dismantles them. It suggests that this world, as we know it, is a closed-loop system of recycled ideas designed to trap your consciousness in repetition. Not to harm you necessarily, but to keep you manageable, predictable, controlled. But the soul was not made to be managed. It was made to expand, to evolve, to become. That's the threat this book poses. Not that it's a cult, not that it's a lie, but that it might actually be true. True in a way that rearranges the furniture of your mind. True in a way that makes you realize you've been standing in a locked room with the key in your hand the whole time. This is not about believing in something new. It's about remembering what was buried. Beneath years of conditioning, beneath layers of shame, beneath every time you were told, don't ask. But now you're asking, and that changes everything. If the universe feels chaotic, it's only because we were taught to see it that way. Our minds were trained to scan the skies and see randomness, explosions, entropy, a cosmos without purpose, a God too distant to matter. But what if the disorder isn't out there? What if it's in us? What if the universe is not broken but perfectly organized, and we've simply forgotten how to read its structure? The Urantia text doesn't offer myth. It outlines architecture. It presents the universe not as a void, but as a living organism, divinely intelligent, tiered, and lovingly maintained. What seems like cosmic wilderness is actually a hierarchy of beings, assignments, and responsibilities, an infinite collaboration of consciousness. It begins with paradise, the still, eternal center of all creation. From there, a cascade of spiritual administration flows outward like branches of a vast, unseen tree. These aren't ethereal abstractions. They are personalities. They are real. Melchizedek's beings of both divine origin and evolutionary empathy serve as teachers, crisis managers, and spiritual midwives. They do not ask for worship. They offer perspective. They remind emerging worlds that even in disruption, there is design. Seraphim, often mistaken in ancient texts as angels, are not winged ornaments. They are the relational threads between time and eternity. They accompany souls from birth to beyond, observing, recording, gently adjusting the soul's trajectory like unseen hands on a ship's rudder. And then there is Michael of Nebadim, the one we once called Jesus. Not merely a prophet or teacher, but a creator son, a divine architect incarnated into human limitation. His mission was not just to save, but to experience every sorrow, every joy, every fear, so that no part of the human condition would remain outside divine understanding. This isn't fantasy. It's function. It's governance by light, not law. It is not domination from above. It is harmonization from within. This is a cosmic administration where every being, no matter how small, plays a role that echoes across dimensions. You were not placed here randomly. You were assigned. Your soul holds a place within this luminous lattice, not as a servant, as a collaborator. You are part of the unfolding pattern, an irreplaceable frequency in the song of creation. So when you feel unseen, know this: there are beings far older than time who see you. When you feel lost, remember, no trajectory is ever wasted. And when you doubt your place in the cosmos, remember this system is too intelligent to have made a mistake. You are exactly where you need to be. Not fiction, not fantasy, just function. Divine, deliberate, and waiting for you to remember. You felt it your whole life, haven't you? That silent distance. That hollow space between what the world tells you and what your inner truth keeps whispering. You walk through your days surrounded by noise, yet something essential always feels missing, like there's a piece of the story no one is telling, a signal you were meant to receive that never came through. That feeling isn't dysfunction, it's evidence. According to the Urantia text, Earth, our planet, is not just another speck in the universe. It is a quarantined world, a spiritual outpost disconnected by design, not by destiny. This isn't poetic metaphor. It is a historical event in cosmic terms. Our world, known beyond our skies as Urantia, was once aligned with a vast spiritual communication system. That connection was severed. The reason? Rebellion. Long before recorded history, a high-ranking celestial administrator, Lucifer, rejected the divine order and initiated a spiritual insurrection. His domain included our planetary system, and his revolt resulted in Earth being cut off from the larger grid of cosmic communication. What followed was not punishment, it was disconnection. We weren't abandoned, we were quarantined. And in that isolation, a new form of suffering emerged, not just war or hunger or death, but the ache of being spiritually deaf. Like a child raised in silence, we forgot the tone of the original voice. The sacred language of the soul faded. We began to worship fear. We called separation normal, but not all was lost. Within every human being, there remains a fragment of divinity, the thought adjuster, silently transmitting wisdom, even when the signal from above was blocked. This was the universe's failsafe, the soul's hidden uplink. It is why, even amidst history's darkest moments, certain individuals spontaneously awakened, channeled, dreamed truths that felt ancient yet new. It's why today, people from all backgrounds speak of a spiritual hunger they can't name, but deeply feel. The comment sections under videos like these aren't just noise, they are testimony. You'll find people admitting, "I feel like I've always known this," or "I didn't believe in anything, but something here resonates." That resonance is memory, soul memory. It cannot be deleted, only delayed, and perhaps now. The quarantine is lifting, not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, soul by soul, moment by moment, as more people begin to hear the signal again. Not from outside, but from within. Not from loud prophets, but through inner clarity. This is the awakening, not an event, but a return. You were never lost. You were silenced, but silence is not the same as absence. The voice of truth waits patiently. And the moment you choose to listen again, the system reconnects. Not because you finally believed, but because you finally remembered. We've been told a version of Jesus so many times that we stopped hearing him. The figure we were given, haloed, untouchable, nailed to a wooden symbol of pain, was a distant savior, someone to worship but never truly understand, someone whose purpose was to die for you, not to live with you. And somehow, in the retelling, we lost the most important part of the story, that Jesus came not to be followed, but to remind you of what you already carry within. In the Urantia text, Jesus is not merely a prophet or a spiritual teacher. He is a creator son, one of many divine beings assigned to inhabit and administer entire universes. His name in that higher context is Michael of Nebadin. Earth was his chosen world of incarnation, not to rule it but to experience it, to walk it as you do, to feel its pain, its hunger, its wonder, and its loss, not from a throne above, but from eye level, heart to heart. He did not come to rescue us. He came to remember with us. And that changes everything. Because if Jesus was not a rescue mission but a relational one, then every moment of his life, every doubt, every ache, every whispered prayer is part of a greater tapestry, a pattern that invites not belief but embodiment. You are not asked to worship him, you are invited to walk with him, not behind him but beside him, as someone learning to hold the same divine seed he carried with such clarity. This reframing matters. It heals. It heals those who were told they were unworthy. It heals those who feared God more than they trusted him. It heals those who left churches but not their hunger for the sacred. And perhaps most powerfully, it heals those who were taught that spiritual truth comes only through hierarchy, through intermediaries, through shame. The Creator Son stepped into time to show that no veil, no ritual, no title stands between you and the divine. He lived not to prove his divinity, but to remind you of yours. And in his death, he did not create salvation. He completed a cycle of experience, one required for him to fulfill his universal role with full empathy and knowledge. When Jesus said, "Follow me," it wasn't a call to blind obedience. It was a whisper to your sleeping spirit, "Remember, walk, awaken." This is not about rejecting the Jesus you once believed in. It's about seeing him more fully, not as a distant light, but as a flame placed within you from the very beginning. The story isn't smaller than you were told. It's much, much larger, and it includes you. We don't fear death because it ends life. We fear it because we've never been taught how to see beyond it. In our stories, death is either an escape or a punishment, a curtain that falls with no way to look behind it. Even our spiritual traditions, for all their symbols and scriptures, rarely describe with clarity what happens next. They trade in mystery, in metaphors, in silence. But what if the soul doesn't vanish? What if it graduates? The Urantia text offers not just a hope, but a map. It begins at the moment of physical death, not as an end, but as a handoff. The physical body, a temporary vehicle, is released. But the soul, the enduring record of all your choices, your growth, your essence, is not alone in this transition. Accompanying you since before memory began is a divine presence known as the thought adjuster. This is not a guide. It is not an angel. It is a piece of God, personal, silent, always observing. Its purpose is to shape your soul gently through conscience, insight, inner knowing. And when your time in this world ends, it is the adjuster who escorts you forward. You awaken, not in a heaven or hell, but in the Urantia realm. Think of it not as a place, but as a phase of existence, a middle reality between matter and spirit. Here, the soul is given new form, not bound by flesh, but not yet luminous spirit. It is a time of integration, of review, of continued learning. In the Urantia state, you are not judged, you are taught. You don't escape your past, you understand it from above with compassion and cosmic clarity. There are many such realms, layers of light and growth through which souls progress, each more expansive than the last. The journey is not linear. It is spiralic, adaptive, intimate. There is no rush, no race, only readiness. And when the soul has matured enough, when it has harmonized with its divine fragment fully, it undergoes fusion. Fusion is not a reward, it is union. the merging of the evolving human self and the eternal adjuster into one indestructible being. From that moment, you are no longer becoming. You simply are, forever forward, forever expanding. This is why the soul does not die, because death, as we've known it, is too small a word for what truly happens. Your consciousness is not extinguished. It is relocated. Your story is not interrupted. It continues with greater clarity, greater agency, greater joy. And those questions you've carried about meaning, about justice, about love that outlasts loss, they are not ignored on the other side. They are answered slowly, personally, as your soul grows strong enough to receive the weight of their truth. You were never meant to fear death. You were meant to walk through it with awareness, with dignity, with trust. Because what waits for you is not an ending, but a return. Not to who you were, but to who you've always been becoming. What if the afterlife isn't about reward or punishment, but refinement? We've inherited so many images of what comes next. Golden gates, eternal singing, or, for the less fortunate, fire and separation. But beneath those pictures lies a more subtle fear, that death might freeze us, lock our story forever into the person we were when we left this world. But the soul is not static, it is a student. According to the Urantia revelations, when the soul passes from this life, it enters not a judgment hall, but a classroom, one more real than anything we've known. It's called the Urantia realm. And it is not where your story ends. It's where it begins again with new awareness. In this state, you are no longer burdened by the physical, but not yet fully spirit. You retain memory, identity, desire, but everything becomes clarified, refined. The Urantia worlds function like cosmic universities, places where experience becomes understanding and insight becomes wisdom. You don't forget your human life. You study it. You see how each choice shaped your soul. You begin to understand what was truly sacred and what was merely survival. There is no rush. No one hurries a flower to bloom. No soul is left behind. Each one progresses at its own pace, guided by loving intelligences who see you not as flawed, but as forming. Healing becomes education. Confusion becomes exploration. You are not expected to be perfect. You are only asked to be open. The Urantia life is not a passive drifting in clouds. It is dynamic, deliberate, alive with meaning. You meet others on the same path. You reunite with kindred spirits. You study systems of truth. You practice spiritual responsibility. Slowly, your consciousness expands to hold truths you could never have imagined from the earth side of the veil. And this is the gift. You begin to see that the universe itself is a school, not to grade you, but to grow you. For the seeker watching this, tired of judgment, exhausted by the silence of life's big questions, this is hope redefined. Not false comfort, but true direction. You are not late, you are not broken, you are becoming still. The Urantia experience tells us that life after death is not a destination, it's a dialogue. A deep, personal unfolding that affirms your value, your potential, and your place in something infinitely kind. This is where your soul is going. Not to be measured, but to be met. And in that meeting, you will begin to remember who you truly are. There's a voice inside you that doesn't shout. It doesn't scold. It doesn't bargain. It waits. In the chaos of everyday thought, it can be hard to hear. But sometimes, when the noise dies down, when the grief softens, when you're finally quiet enough to listen, it speaks. This is not your mind. It is not your ego. And it is not imagination. It is your thought adjuster. The Urantia teachings call this presence a fragment of God, an undiluted sliver of divine consciousness placed within you, not to control you, but to companion you. It entered your life long before memory, and it will remain long after your final breath, not watching from afar, but walking alongside you, step by quiet step. You felt it before, in that unspoken knowing that told you not to go down a certain road, in the unexplainable clarity that arrived in the middle of despair, in the moments when truth hit you, not as information, but as recognition. The thought adjuster is not an outside force. It is the oldest, wisest part of you, the part not touched by trauma, ego, or time. It does not argue, it does not interfere. It suggests, it nudges, it aligns. It speaks in symbols, in dreams, in silence that somehow feels full. And most of us miss it, not because we are broken, but because the world trains us to look outward, to outsource wisdom, to trust only what can be measured. But if you've ever whispered to the stars, if you've ever asked for a sign, if you've ever said, "God, just show me something," then you've already been in dialogue. The thought adjuster doesn't need your belief. It only needs your willingness. It's not here to make your life easier. It's here to make your soul eternal, to help you make choices that lead toward truth, beauty, and goodness, because those choices shape the architecture of the being you are becoming. And this is the miracle. You are never alone. Even in your loneliest moment, there is something divine that has never left. It doesn't need you to perform. It only asks that you pay attention. The comments left beneath spiritual videos often carry this ache. I've always felt like something was guiding me, but I didn't know what it was. Now you do. It was never a ghost. It was never a fantasy. It was God, inside you, waiting for you to remember that you've never been abandoned. You've only been distracted, and now you're starting to listen. We were taught to see the universe as a machine, cold, neutral, indifferent. A vast ticking clock of particles and probability winding forward toward entropy. Science, they said, is the study of matter. Spirit, the stuff of myth. Keep them separate, keep them safe. But the deeper we look, the stranger it gets. At the smallest level, beneath atoms, beneath logic, particles flicker in and out of existence. They behave differently when observed. They seem to know they're being watched. The closer we come to understanding reality, the more it behaves like a question asking itself. This isn't metaphor, it's quantum mechanics. And it's beginning to echo something mystics have whispered for centuries. The universe is not dead, it's alive. Not in the way a heart beats, but in the way awareness moves. Consciousness doesn't emerge from matter. Matter emerges within consciousness. This is the shift, not just in theory, but in perception. The Urantia perspective takes this one step further. The universe is not only conscious, it is coordinated, governed not by chaos or chance, but by intelligence. Layered, ordered, personal. Its structure is spiritual, not mechanical. Its design is not random. It reflects intention. Every galaxy is a system of meaning. every world a node in a larger network of soul evolution. And you are not floating in a void. You are embedded in a field of purpose. This isn't about choosing science over spirit or spirit over science. It's about realizing they were never meant to be rivals. They are two eyes of the same face. Science describes the mechanics. Spirit reveals the meaning. And both are beginning to say the same thing. We are not alone. We were never meant to be. So much of modern isolation, the numbness, the anxiety, the urge to find your place, comes from believing that consciousness is rare, that intelligence is an accident, that love is a byproduct of chemicals. But when you begin to see the universe as alive, as aware, as reaching for you just as you reach for it, something changes. You stop begging for signs. You start recognizing them. Many comments under videos like this reflect the same pattern. This resonates. I don't know why, but I feel like I've always known this. That feeling is not confusion. It's memory. Not new belief, but old truth resurfacing. You are not a passenger in a meaningless system. You are a participant in a symphony of consciousness. And the moment you realize that, the moment you live like that, the universe doesn't just observe you, it responds. Time feels like a boundary. It slices your life into years, days, decisions. It forces you to measure who you've become against who you once imagined you'd be. And yet, time, this relentless, unyielding tide, is not your enemy. It's your curriculum. In the universe described by the Urantia revelations, time and space are not accidents or illusions. They are intentional classrooms, carefully constructed dimensions of experience designed to teach the soul what eternity never could. How to choose, how to grow, how to become. Here, in this realm of gravity and delay, you learn by doing. You suffer not because you are cursed, but because the laws of soul evolution demand contact, resistance, and choice. Without time, there is no patience. Without space, no relationship. Without delay, no devotion. This is not punishment, this is formation. The goal is not escape. The goal is expansion, and the destination, paradise. But not as a reward, not as a golden afterlife at the end of suffering. Paradise, in Urantia's view, is the eternal center of the universe, a real, absolute location of spiritual gravity. It is where the presence of the Universal Father resides. But you are not sent there. You grow there. You earn the gravity of its light by becoming equal to it. Every decision you make nudges your soul closer or farther from that center. But the path is not rigged. There is no predestined outcome. Soul evolution is a sacred collaboration between you and the indwelling divine presence, the thought adjuster. You are not a puppet. You are a partner. This view reframes everything. It means your life is not an exam, it's a map. Your failures aren't final. Your wounds aren't disqualifications. They are part of a larger process, gently unfolding your awareness toward divine maturity. You don't have to be perfect. You only have to be willing. Many spiritual seekers feel burdened by the idea that salvation is binary, heaven or hell, saved or lost. But Urantia offers something gentler, truer. Your destiny is not based on belief, but on becoming. Paradise is not reserved for the elect. It is the natural home of any soul who chooses truth, beauty and goodness enough to become those things themselves. And the miracle is this: there is no rush. Time will do its work, space will do its work. And when you're ready, you'll move beyond them both, not as an escape, but as a graduation. This is not a race, it's a remembering. A journey not to a place, but to your highest self, reflected in the light of the original source. If your soul doesn't die, then what is it being prepared for? It's a question that changes everything. Because if consciousness continues, if your story extends beyond this life, then you are not just surviving, you're training. The Urantia teachings don't just describe a living universe. They describe a managed one, an ordered, cooperative network of spiritual intelligences where every being, from the smallest mortal to the highest creator, has a role, a purpose, a place in the pattern. And here's what might surprise you. You are not at the bottom of this design. You are its future. Each human life, no matter how ordinary it may seem, is a seed. And within that seed is the potential to evolve, to fuse with the divine, and eventually to help govern the very universe that once shaped you. Not through domination, through wisdom, through experience, through empathy born from having walked the long road from dust to light. You are being formed for spiritual leadership. Think about that. Your struggles with doubt, identity, forgiveness, they're not distractions. They are shaping the only kind of leader this cosmos respects, one who has suffered, healed, and chosen light anyway. The soul that grows in love becomes trustworthy. The mind that seeks truth becomes precise. The heart that stays open becomes magnetic. You've seen hints of this in the comment sections. People quietly waking up, stepping into language like frequency, calling, higher purpose. They don't say it out loud, but what they mean is, I know I came here for something more. And they're right. The end game isn't perfection, it's participation. Eventually, the evolving soul becomes part of the universal administration, helping to mentor younger worlds, guiding new beings, carrying light into corners still tangled in shadow. You are not small. You are not powerless. You are in training to become what you once thought only gods could be. So now the question isn't whether you matter. It's whether you're ready to remember. Because the spiritual government of the universe isn't just above you. It's within you, forming in silence, ripening in fire, waiting for the moment when you finally step forward and say, I remember who I am. I know why I came. I'm ready to serve. There's a silence that never leaves you. It sits in the background of every conversation, every moment of success, every attempt to feel normal. It's the quiet sense that something is missing, but you can't name it. Like you're playing a role in a script that was handed to you, but never quite fits. This isn't depression. It's not dysfunction. It's recognition. You feel like you don't belong because, on some level, you remember a reality where you did. The Urantia text speaks to this ache, not as an accident, but as a symptom of Earth's unique condition. This is a quarantined world, a place that has been cut off spiritually for thousands of years due to a rebellion most people have never heard of. We were meant to be part of a larger system of soul nourishment, communication, and guidance, but that connection was severed. So you've grown up in a world where spiritual amnesia is the norm. You've been taught to adapt, to succeed, but never to understand your true origin. And now that buried memory, the soul's longing to return to coherence, is waking up. That feeling of not belonging, it's not your flaw, it's your call. It's the signal that your soul is stirring, that the veil is thinning, that you're ready to remember. For many watching, this awakening begins as a kind of crisis. You start questioning everything: your career, your relationships, your beliefs. The ground shifts. The people around you say, just be grateful. You're overthinking. You need to get back to normal. But what if normal was never your path? What if you were never supposed to fit in? The Urantia view suggests that many of the most sensitive, intuitive, or misfit souls on this planet are the very ones who came here on purpose, to hold a different frequency, to anchor light, to challenge the systems that no longer serve. You feel like you don't belong because your soul belongs to something higher, and you're being called to realign with it. Not to escape this world, but to change your relationship to it. To live here without forgetting where you came from. And know that path isn't easy, but it is sacred. So if you're watching this with tears in your eyes, wondering if something is wrong with you, hear this clearly. Nothing is wrong. Something is waking up. Something ancient, something holy, something true. You were never meant to belong to a broken system. You were meant to rebuild what was lost, not alone, but together, with others who are waking up too. You were not born to bow. You were born to burn with clarity, with knowing, with light that no system can dim. Religion told you to believe. Urantia invites you to experience. This is the threshold, not of a new belief, but of a new way of being. For too long, humanity has been shaped by inherited stories, many beautiful, many binding. We've bowed to institutions that built walls between us and the divine. We've been told that truth is owned, that enlightenment is licensed, that salvation must be sold back to us by those in robes or power. But the old temples are crumbling. The old voices are fading, because they were never meant to last. What rises now isn't a new religion. It's a return to spiritual agency. Urantia doesn't ask for your obedience. It doesn't ask for your money. It doesn't demand that you abandon what's sacred to you. It simply asks one question. Are you ready to remember? To remember that truth is not in the book, it's in the being. That revelation is not what you're told, it's what awakens inside you. This is the real revolution. Quiet, personal, relentless. It doesn't happen on stages or in temples. It happens in your living room. At 3 a.m. when your soul whispers, there must be more than this. And for the first time you listen. This revolution doesn't need leaders, it needs lighthouses. People who live their truth without apology, who feel the frequency of divine presence and dare to reflect it, who understand that to teach is to embody, that to awaken others, you simply have to stay awake. So if you're watching this, it's not by accident. You are not the audience. You are the transmission. The old world is fading. A new one is waiting to be born through you. This is not religion, it's revolution. And your soul has already voted yes. You didn't stumble onto this message. You weren't scrolling mindlessly. You weren't just curious. You were guided, not by algorithms, but by alignment. Something in you, quiet, ancient, unbreakable, brought you here because you were ready to hear it. Maybe you began this journey in skepticism. Maybe you've spent years searching, only to circle back to the same unanswered ache. Maybe you felt like a misfit in your own skin, or like the world spoke a language you could never fully understand. But now, something lands, not as a fact, as a frequency. And maybe for the first time you don't just believe, you remember. This is not just about the Urantia Book. It's not about subscribing to a new doctrine or learning celestial hierarchies by heart. It's about recognizing your own evolution, from unconscious survival to conscious participation, from victimhood to co-creation, from forgetting to remembering. You are not a background character in someone else's myth. You are a sovereign being, waking up to the part you agreed to play long before birth. You're not here to be convinced. You're here to be confirmed. Because deep down, you've always known that life is not random. That pain has purpose. That awakening is real. That there is more, so much more than what the eyes can see. So now the question is whether this is true. The question is, what will you do with it? This is your moment, not to follow, but to reflect. To carry what you've remembered into conversations, into creativity, into silence. Not to argue, but to anchor. Not to preach, but to embody. You were not called here to consume light. You were called to transmit it. So if your heart is beating a little louder right now, that's not emotion. That's recognition. You are not here by accident. You never were. And the world is waiting for your light to remember itself. Let this be the beginning. You've been hearing it for a while now. A whisper beneath the noise. A stirring just under the surface of thought. A signal you couldn't name but couldn't ignore either. It's why you stayed through this entire journey. Why each word felt less like information and more like recognition. That voice inside you, it never needed to be convinced. It only needed to be called. What you've just experienced wasn't a doctrine. It wasn't a download of facts. It was a return to something you've carried all along, hidden behind the distractions of everyday life, the sacred ache for truth. And now, perhaps for the first time, that ache has a name. No, this video didn't give you answers. That was never the point. What it gave you was something far more valuable, the right questions. The kind that dissolve illusions, the kind that can't be unasked, the kind that point inward until the only place left to search is within. You don't need more proof, you need more stillness, because what you're looking for isn't out there. It's already speaking inside you, in dreams, in longings, in the silence between your thoughts. It's been there, patient, waiting for the moment you would pause long enough to hear its name. And now you have. So let this be where words end and knowing begins. Because deep down you remember now, don't you? You always have.